Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today let's talk about some cool studio remakes of songs recorded by the same artist. I'm going to start off here with an album that was released in 1977. The first album, the debut from Peter Gabriel. The final track on this album is called Here Comes the Flood. It's an absolute amazing closer of a song, spine-tingling, intense, absolutely gorgeous. Just gives it's just amazing. Just amazing. Fast forward 13 years, Gabriel puts out this compilation here. It is called Shaking the Tree 16 Golden Greats. And he does a solo piano remake version of Here Comes the Flood that is so haunting, completely different than the version on his first album. I remember seeing him do this version. I believe it was on the Security Tour, his fourth album, at the Universal Amphitheater. I think he came out. It was near the encore segment of the performance, and he came out and just sat on his like Rhodes piano and did a version of this. And I remember the crowd was just in hushed silence. Everybody was just blown away by the beauty of this track. And then again, he re-records it for this compilation, this greatest hits album that came out in 1990, and it is a fantastic remake of, I think, one of his greatest solo tracks. So Here Comes the Flood, Peter Gabriel, fantastic remake. Another one, the first album by the Nazz, featuring Todd Rundgren, has the original version of Hello, It's Me on it, and it is great. It's a great version. There's some really nice harmonies on here, but I really love the version he remade on Something Anything, which became a huge hit in 1972. What I really dig about it is that it's not the studio edit version. I love this version on the album where the Think of Me coda, done by, I think there's some studio session players singing along with him. Most of the songs on this album, he plays all the tracks himself, but there are a few tracks. I think side 4 is where he brings in other players, and he has these female backup singers. And the way it ends, the music ends, and it's just a cappella, Think of Me. It's fantastic. So another great remake of a great song, Hello, It's Me, originally done by the Nazz on their first album. I believe it came out in 68, 69. Later redone by the man himself, Todd Rundgren, on Something Anything from 1972. Oh, another one I really, really dig is, first of all, I love this song to begin with, right? This is off Fleetwood Mac's album from 1972, Bare Trees. The song Sentimental Lady, written by Bob Welch. This is during the Bob Welch period of Fleetwood Mac. Post Peter Green, Bob Welch. The Bob Welch era lasted quite a while. Well, maybe about 5 years, 4 or 5 years. But anyway, there's a great version here, the original version of Sentimental Lady. You got Christy McVie singing backup vocals, and it's really, really good. But I really, really love the remake that Bob Welch did on French Kiss here, which became a huge hit. This is really what you call a really nice slice of ear candy. I mean, melodically rich. The arrangement is fantastic. Obviously, it's a little more commercial than the initial release on Bare Trees, but man, I tell you, this is one of my favorite like late 70s AM hits. Love Sentimental Lady, and I got to tell you, man, just from the verse to the chorus to the instrumentation, it is just fantastic. So love the remake of Sentimental Lady by Bob Welch from the French Kiss album from 1977. There was a brief period there where he was becoming a star. This album had not only Sentimental Lady on it, it had Hot Love in a Cold World, Ebony Eyes. So yeah, this was a huge hit, this album. But from there on, his career kind of went down the tubes a bit. But he did write some great songs, Bob Welch. Sentimental Lady from Bob Welch from French Kiss. If you're a fan of this album, as I am, I love all the Doors albums, and I really love Morrison Hotel. This is their fourth album. Is it their fourth album? Let me think here. Fifth album. Fifth album released in 1970. There's a track on here, Buried on Side 2, that never gets a lot of attention, and I love this track. It's called Queen of the Highway. It's the third track on Side 2. But there was an original version done in during the sessions that I first heard on the Doors box set here that came out in the late 90s. And it's the third song on the first disc, recorded during the same sessions. And it is really cool. It has this kind of, it's completely different than the Morrison Hotel version. It has this kind of cocktail lounge jazz vibe with this really cool piano played by Ray Manzarek. It's slowed down. There's no drum. There's no speed involved like on the Morrison Hotel version. It's just really laid back. You can almost hear the Doors playing it in some kind of a late night cafe, cocktail lounge. It is so, so good. And it just shows you how great they were as musicians. Ray Manzarek's piano playing, John Densmore's really, really kind of understated drumming on this particular version. If you've never heard this version of Queen of the Highway, check it out. It is fantastic. It's also on, there's a like a condensed version of this box set called the Doors Rarities. It's on that particular single disc as well. I don't even know if this is available anymore, but if you find the singles, Rarities, Doors CD, which is kind of a condensed version of the best tracks on here, check it out. Or just pull it up on YouTube. Queen of the Highway, the original version, which later became the third track on side 2 of Morrison Hotel. Really, really good stuff. Another one too, back in 1968, James Taylor released his debut on Apple Records. He was one of the first Apple record artists that was signed by the Beatles. He does 2 songs on here, Carolina in My Mind and Something in the Way She Moves. They're very, very raw versions. Something in the Way She Moves is just him playing on the acoustic. It's really, really good. In fact, I remember the first time I heard this album as a child. I remember we had a library that had a small section of records you could check out with books. And I remember checking out Sunflower by the Beach Boys. I remember checking this one out too. I must have been about 9 years old. So the first time I ever heard Something in the Way She Moves and Carolina in My Mind was on this particular album. And I loved those 2 tracks. They stood out like a sore thumb among all the other tracks on there. A lot of the other tracks on here are kind of, I wouldn't say they were bad. They're just kind of mediocre compared to what was to come from JT down the line. But back in 1976, though, when James Taylor released this huge multi-million selling album, Greatest Hits, he did a reworking of Something in the Way She Moves and Carolina in My Mind, which I think most people know these particular versions. They're great. They're definitely more studio perfected, definitely more commercial. And these songs have become kind of like standards in JT's live repertoire. To this day, he still plays these songs. So as much as I love these original versions here on the first album here, I think these I like just a little bit better over time. So great reworkings of songs recorded by the same artist. Really fits this particular artist here. James Taylor, Something in the Way She Moves and Carolina in My Mind. Oh, another great one here. Of course, one of the first, let's face it, one of the first psychedelic tracks to ever hit the top 10, top 15. The song Shapes of Things by the Yardbirds, released in like mid-1966, featuring this really cool breakdown with the guitar and Jeff Beck offering these new sounds that were never heard before on an album or a single. Very, very ushering in, along with 8 Miles High by the Byrds, this new kind of psychedelic era, right? So love the version by the Yardbirds. Love it, love it. Then Jeff Beck on the Truth album, his debut album, did a reworking of Shapes of Things with Rod Stewart singing lead. Completely different version, but it really kicks ass. And it's just as good as the Yardbirds version, but in a completely different way. You got Mickey Waller on drums, Ron Wood on bass. Really early Rod Stewart here, just belting it out. And, it's really weird about Rod Stewart's voice. It really has changed over time. It doesn't really have that rasp anymore, if you've noticed. I saw Rod Stewart with Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck made a special appearance at the Hollywood Bowl maybe about 8 years ago, 7 years ago. And he just doesn't have that rasp anymore, that Rod Stewart rasp. But I love the Yardbirds Shape of Things, but I love this reworking of Shapes of Things on Jeff Beck's Truth. It's just fantastic. Back during the recording of Elton John's second album, his first album was Empty Sky. It wasn't released in the U.S. The first time we heard of Elton John in the U.S. was his debut, which featured your song, Border Song, Take Me to the Pilot. Just a fantastic debut. But during these sessions, he did a version, an early version of the song called Gray Seal, which is really stripped down and really, really cool. A lot different than the version that would appear on Goodbye Yellow Brick Road years later, why don't we say about 3 years later. Love this version on Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. It's more rocking. It has that great guitar playing by Davy Johnstone, Nigel Olsson on drums. But if you've never heard this early version, it's a bonus cut on this reissue of the Elton John album, the self-titled album. Check it out. It's really cool. It has a completely different vibe, more scaled down, but really, really cool. Another one, 1973, an album that still hasn't been released on CD for some reason. I don't know why. It's the Buckingham Nicks album. You do an early version here of Crystal, which would appear on the self-titled Fleetwood Mac album from 1975. They're very similar, but I think they're both outstanding. I really love this particular Fleetwood Mac album. If I had to choose between this one and Rumors, I think this one is the one. I don't think there's really a bad moment on this entire record. The version of Crystal on here is fantastic. If you've never heard the version of Crystal on the Buckingham Nicks album, pull it up. It's really, really cool. A little more stripped down, a little less produced. Really, really good stuff. Another one here is Bob Dylan's Girl from the North Country from Freewheelin' Bob Dylan from '63. I think I mentioned this other version in a video not too long ago. In 1969, he would release Nashville Skyline and do Girl from the North Country with Johnny Cash. Really, really cool. Ragged. It's almost like kind of like they're fighting with the vocals. They're singing over one another, but there's something really kind of moving about it. I know some people don't like this version. I've always liked it, though, for some reason. I don't know. It was featured in some movie. I can't remember what the movie was with Jennifer Lawrence. But anyway, great, great version here of Girl from the North Country. A great reworking of a song previously recorded on Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. And last but not least, I've mentioned this CD in the past a few times. I picked it up about a year or two ago. It's one of many of Neil Young's reissue campaign albums. And it's an album called Early Days. And it features a lot of songs. Well, not a lot of songs. It features songs that would later become part of the Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere album. There's songs on here like Wonderin', which never was even on an album. And you got different versions of Cowgirl in the Sand and Down by the River. But there's an early version of the song called Birds, which would later appear on After the Gold Rush. So this particular version of Birds has Crazy Horse backing him up. So you got that classic Crazy Horse sound, you know, that guitar sound. It's really, really good. If you've never heard it, I think this is one of the most moving songs Neil Young has ever produced. Birds. And then, of course, on After the Gold Rush, he releases a piano solo version of himself just singing, which is just absolutely, you know, tear-inducing. It's one of those songs I mentioned on my Songs That Make You Weep video. I've always loved the track, but I got to be in a certain mood to listen to it. But yeah, check it out. Check out this version of Birds on Early Days, or just pull it up on YouTube with Crazy Horse playing behind him. And then check out the version right after of the original release version on After the Gold Rush. It's fantastic with just him and the piano. So those are just some examples, ladies and gentlemen, of some reworkings of songs by the same artist, basically studio remakes of songs recorded by the same artist. Please offer more in the comments section. I know there's plenty out there. I'd like to know what you think. What other songs that you've heard by the same artist that you dig. Let me know in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching. Take care, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.